Hi, and welcome to Poltergeist Board Games. Today, I'm very excited to have a special guest with me, one of my favorite game designers, Thomas Van Hare. He's with the Historic Wings, and his first book that he made is Tally Ho, and his second book that he made is one of my favorites, Mag 23 Guadalcanal. And his third one, which I haven't gotten yet because I'm waiting for the boxed version to come out, but I'm looking forward to playing that one, and that one's SOE Lysander. So Thomas, welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining me early in the morning on your end of the world.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm in Sweden, so it's 8 o'clock in the morning here, and I guess about 11 o'clock in Los Angeles, where you are.
Yeah,
although it's like San Francisco behind you.
I'm in the mountains in Lake Tahoe, so it's 3.5 hours away from San Francisco. But
Oh, that's very nice.
yeah,
So anyway, yeah, thank you for having me on. It's a great honor always to talk on any of the YouTube channels, and congratulations on the launch of your new channel.
Thank you.
You're already doing quite well, and I think it's going to go very well. Love the format very much.
Thank you so much. Do you want to do any more type of introduction or?
Oh, it's for me, this is my full-time job now. Is writing books and designing war games. Also, I do YouTube video channels, but I'm originally a former senior White House official, and I've done operations. I'm a pilot, done operations globally, and have worked a lot in technology and other kinds of non-traditional uses of military in the current global situation, which is very unstable. So I have a bit of a background for this kind of work, and that's, so for me, it's quite natural to do this.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So we'll jump into this is 10 questions with Thomas Van Hare. So question number 1, what inspired you to become a game designer?
It's actually a good question. I am a historian, I think, first and foremost. And the inspirations really are the stories of the individuals in history, what they went through, what they experienced, how they lived, particularly pilots. Being a pilot myself, I always have an affinity with stories about flying and aviation. And, as war gamers, we like to think about what it would have been like if we had been there in charge, if we had been flying the mission, if we had been commanding the armies and so forth. But it isn't necessarily entertainment that drives that alone. It's an interest in history. And so for a historian to design war games is quite a natural thing. And I'm a little bit surprised that other historians haven't been doing it for many, many years. It seems like most of the war games have a history section, kind of a paragraph or a half a page bolted on at the end, and they assume the gamer understands history. But that's not necessarily true. And so as a historian, that's what drove me to it. I originally got started in war games from my father when I was very young. I think I played my first war game at something like age 10. We had games like Stalingrad and Afrika Korps in the house from Avalon Hill and so forth. So these are the games that I started with. And then ultimately out came Air Force Dauntless, and we played the heck out of that. My father was also a pilot. He was a navigator in the Air Force officer, flew in the Korean War. And so, a lot of these things, very interesting to connect war games and history was always there. And it was very personal.
I never got into Avalon Hill except for, early on, my dad and my best friend got me into Axis and Allies. That was my first foray into wargaming. But, those were big games and took a couple days to finish and stuff. But very good. Question number 2. What is your next project you're working on?
I'm currently working on four different games. And that's kind of how I live and how I write as well. Every morning I get up and I write. It's usually an hour, and then I'll have some coffee, eat something perhaps. And the idea that I have is that if every day I write a little bit, page or two or three or four, that every day I'm getting closer to the goal of publishing. Now, this is a kind of an old aviation thing, is if you point your nose at the enemy, eventually you'll reach him or her nowadays. And so you just keep going, just keep flying toward the target, and you'll eventually reach it. So right now I'm working on, of course, Achtung Jabo, which is about you get to command a fighter group on D-Day over northern France, over Normandy. And it's one of those kind of games that is a lot of fun. It plays very visually. The flak bursts around the airplanes that you place on the map. The aircraft are not depicted from above, but rather from the side in a descending, diving, strafing attitude. In the flak bursts, you actually roll to place them around your airplanes. And you have different phases leading in. The second one is derivative of that. It's Typhoon, which covers the British experience, but not at D-Day, but afterwards in the breakout at Caen and so forth. I have also an add-on game to Mag 23 Guadalcanal that's in the works called Mag 14, which carries on the 16th of October with the rest of the story. And so this will be a very, very low cost book, because obviously it's I don't have to include the counters and the maps and everything else. Again, it's the tables and the histories. And so it allows you to continue on with your campaign if you so choose. And you yourself have done quite a good campaign of that. In fact, I think you are the greatest winner in the history of the game. You actually managed to get to American victory, and managed to get an ace that is tied or exceeding Dick Bong's record score in actual World War II of 40 kills. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
The last of the bunch is La Fière, which is an airborne game, and that is being co-released with a friend of mine, Helen Patton, who's General Patton's granddaughter. So it'll be available at La Fière Bridge. She has a guest house there directly by the bridge. So if you go to D-Day, and I highly recommend that you do tour the battlefields at Normandy, go to Normandy, stay at La Fière guest house right by La Fière Bridge, and learn the history. It's a phenomenal place, and Helen is a wonderful person. She's not often there, but she comes and goes as she chooses. So that's.
I mean, I can't wait for all of those games.
Thank you. Neither can I.
Especially the Achtung Jabo, because I don't know, I like that squadron. Like I really liked the feel of Mag 23, and how you could you could have these pilots that you named, and you kind of grew an attachment to. I don't know if it's going to be exactly like that, but you grew an attachment. Like we had the Doug Bright, who had an attachment to Lieutenant Tayo in my squadron, and Lieutenant Tayo, he'd get shot down, and he'd get rescued and come back, and he became a double ace, and so you kind of follow these storylines and create these storylines, and it's really a lot of fun. So I'm hoping it's kind of similar to that. But
Yeah, there is some similarity. Every one of these games is quite unique. We'll go into that, I think, in a minute. But I wanted to say that it only has you commanding the squadron or the group, the fighter group, which is 3 squadrons for one day.
Yeah.
There is narrative in that. You do have the option to name your pilots or use the historic pilot roster from the actual fighter group.
Mm.
And you will develop real stories from this. You get to fly 2 patrols, each of which has, you divide your 3 fighter squadrons up into 2 different units that fly on different patrol routes. And the threats come at you pretty fast. And good thing is the P-47 takes a lot of damage because the Germans have an awful lot of flak.
Oh yeah.
Early on, right at D-Day, the Germans were at their best. Well, they weren't at their best, but they had their most flak available. They had the most 88 guns. They had the most short-range flak, and all of that is discussed in the tactics of how you approach a target, and everything is discussed and revealed. And so you learn a lot about what it was to actually manage a fighter group. There's preparation for the mission. You have to assign your men into flights, and you organize the flights, and you have to have a radio relay, and some of the aircraft will be strictly outfitted with bombs, and others you'll outfit with rockets and bombs, and others you'll have for air superiority. You may get intercepted by the Luftwaffe. Now, historically, that didn't happen much, and it won't necessarily happen in this game either. But if you're out there without fighter cover and you do get intercepted by the Luftwaffe, you're going to lose a lot of airplanes. So it's quite a risk not to go up with at least some air cover. So there's a real story that does evolve in it. And one of the things that I focus on in all my games is this narrative style. I want to bring the reader and the player into the actual circumstances of what it was to be there, and to imagine themselves and to imagine the others and what it took to actually fight these battles.
All right. Question 3, can you describe your typical creative process when designing a new game?
Yeah.
I'm sure it varies.
This is actually a very interesting and complex question. I think my design methodology is completely different, I think, from most people's. I read the other game designers' notes, and I look at their games, and I see how they work and how they design it. And primarily, it appears that they start with the game. They have some historical theme, but they start with the game, and they work on the game mechanics and how does this play and how does this relate to that and so on. And they're always primarily focused on this game balance question. And I don't even care about game balance in a way. I mean, I do, but history drives the design, not the other way around. I set out, a good example is Tally Ho and Mag 23. My original thought was I published Tally Ho. It's a pretty good game. I thought Mag 23 would be, very similar. So I literally laid out Mag 23 in the same format as Tally Ho. Multiple missions that you fly, and it defines what is the campaign. None of it made sense for Guadalcanal. The history of what happened there is so dramatically different from the history of the Battle of Britain that the 2 gaming systems couldn't possibly work together. The Japanese come, they have one target. So, they don't turn left or right or go straight, or, you don't have to intercept them here or there. They come directly to Henderson Field every time. And, even in bad weather, it's kind of hard to miss. You pick up the north coast of the island and you fly along the north coast of the island, and there's the target. They flew 8 hours down the slot in the bombers, back and forth. And it's an incredibly long mission with just one little period of combat at the end. And the Japanese, after flying all these hours to get there, if they lost a few airplanes, they didn't turn around. They continued on to the target. and there were very many that were quite fanatical. So the other experience that came out of that was that, if the history drives the design, then the design has to mirror the history. So if a certain period of the battle is at a crescendo, that's where the crescendo is going to be, whether or not the player is ready for it. And so this particularly affects SOE Lysander, by the way. In this game, it's completely different. All of these games are completely different as a result of their historic background. In SOE Lysander, you fly as a single pilot. And your job is not to shoot down anybody. It's not to engage in aerial combat. It's to sneak your way through German air defenses, night fighters, flak, ground fire from rifles even, to get to a distant landing zone in France. Land in a farmer's field, drop off special agents, pick up others, drop off some cargo, pick up some others like documents and such, stolen, spy documents, and get them back to England. So the entire game becomes a matter of working your way through these defenses, picking your way through to the target, which is, your landing spot, hoping that it's not the Gestapo waiting on the ground instead of the French resistance, because that can happen in the game. And then after you drop off everybody and come back, then you work your way back. And the game actually created a situation where you kind of pick your way through to that target. And if you think like a pilot in that situation, you'll do fine. And if you think like a war gamer, you won't. And this was a kind of an interesting discovery, because early on, we had one of the guys who bought the game, fantastic fellow, by the way, the Blue Tweezers is what he's known as online. He played it and he couldn't seem to win. And I kept thinking, how is this possible? Because everybody who play tested it, all of them were pilots, as it turned out. I realized that later. They didn't have a problem actually getting through to the target and coming back. And so I went back to it and I thought, do I withdraw this game? What's going on here? And then I realized it really is, you have to think like a pilot. You have to learn that. And the game teaches you that as well. When the weather is going bad and you've got night fighters up ahead and you're taking ground fire and the plane is damaged and you're running low on fuel and the weather, you've got icing on the wings. As a regular pilot, you turn around and go home. You can fly that tomorrow. But war gamers are like, oh, I hope I make this dice roll. And they drive ahead, and you can't do that in this game. You will not survive. That's not how it works in life. So the game teaches you to think like a pilot. So anyway, all of the games are actually drawn from history. That's what the creative process is. And then it's just a matter of writing. And the history gets written first, then the rules. It's not the other way around. So I write an entire history section for the book before I take a hack at the rules. By the way, on SOE Lysander, there's a multiplayer group that we're starting up. So you're welcome to join that. We'll need six players to fly as a flight of 161 Squadron in the RAF.
When does it start? When does that start up?
When we get 6 players and everybody's ready. So it might be a few weeks or a month or something. We'll see.
All right. I'm still holding out for the box version.
It's probably about a month away.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll have to break down and buy the book version, and then the next game I'll get the boxed version there.
So the boxed version doesn't come with the book in it. You need both.
Oh, okay.
So you never go wrong buying the book and then getting the box. The box is a set of the components and assets you need to play if you don't want to make your own. Gotcha. That gives you a lot of flexibility. Those that don't have as much money in their budget and can make their own counters can just get the book, make their own counters, and they're in a war game for cheap, because it's much less than a typical war game plays costs these days. If you get the box version and the book fits neatly into the box, and the combined cost of the two is about what most war games are when they're on sale today.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
Well, that's good knowledge.
Get it if you wish.
All right. All right. Question 4. Your game books are full of history. Why do you feel the need to add such robust history to your games?
Yeah, we covered some of that already. If it isn't derived from history, it doesn't teach real history. And for me, every war game, every book is a teaching opportunity. And I think that's what's missing today. Books are both more and more popular and less sellable somehow. People they buy. We talk about shelves of shame in wargaming. You should see, avid readers' shelves. They have 20 books, 30 books, 50 books that they haven't read that they bought that are on their shelf. And it's very difficult for the modern reader to get through a 400-page history book. I can tell you that. So my challenge is to draw the history into something that is 10 or 20 pages of very concise, detailed, accurate history. And often there's original research involved in these books. So the process is, it's primarily focused on history and teaching history, because that's what's needed. We need to teach history in the world today. If we don't teach history, we're doomed to replay it, using the war game term.
Yeah.
So I think today in particular, given the current world situation where we are in an era of conflict, frankly, the more we know about history, the more likely we are to come through this okay and to get to something of stability, security, and peace again. But those challenges are pretty significant. It's not a good time out here right now around the world. We've got 2 major wars going on and the possibility of a third and even potentially a fourth. So we are in a very, very dark place globally. So I think wargaming and history are a good combination, and it makes history accessible to people. I don't know if I answered the question completely there.
No, you did.
Okay.
All right. Question 5. Can you share a specific challenge you faced in one of your game designs and how you overcame it?
I would have to say that in SOE Lysander, the biggest challenge was how to overcome the actual complexity of what it is to fly an airplane. The game is so accurate to flying that you kind of have to know how to fly a little bit to play the game. And the only way to get through that was to create very, very extensive, deep sequences of play, SOPs.
So my 3 hours in a Cessna will help me out.
It will, actually.
Okay.
It absolutely will.
Right.
3 hours in a Cessna will do a lot. I highly recommend it for everybody. Everybody should learn to fly. It changes your perspective on the world. But the game had to have these SOPs, because I couldn't come up with a way to have the player memorize. It was almost like a checklist. So there are pages of SOPs, one for each stage of the game. And so writing and rewriting and so forth in those SOPs to get the player on track was probably the greatest challenge I faced in that game. That was a really extraordinary problem. And I worry that players won't go through those detailed SOPs or pay enough attention to them, but they're written kind of in a simple way so that you know what you have to do. You don't have to refer back to the rules each time. You'll get very used to playing it very quickly. And if you want to see how it's played, go to the Greg Amos channel on YouTube. He did a phenomenal, he's still doing them, series of videos on playing SOE Lysander. And he literally walks through the SOPs. He says the titles of each stage as he goes and each phase. So it really helps a lot to understand the game.
All right, question 6. What are you playing now?
Believe it or not, it's play testing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but in Tally Ho, in the boxed version, there's a new game added, an add-on module called Operation Silo,
Mm.
and or Sea Lion. It was the invasion of England by Germany, and they won the Battle of Britain. And so this is an add-on game. And it was originally thought, okay, I'll just throw on another mission. Well, of course, I'm never satisfied with that. So 2 weeks later, I'm still playtesting and working it up. I'm not including the whole history of Operation Silo. I could turn that whole thing into its own game, but it doesn't need that. But one has to remember that England doesn't have any ground forces to speak of. This is just a few months after Dunkirk. They haven't re-equipped the army. They've got soldiers marching with broomsticks. There's no tanks. There's no trucks. There's nothing they can do. If the Germans literally got a single division onto English soil, they would have marched unopposed all the way to London. And so the game gives you this really extreme challenge. You have to stop all of the German invasion fleets. And there are 5 of them. And that's historically inaccurate. There's a 6th one that is on the western end of England that just doesn't make sense from a gameplay perspective, so I didn't include it. But there's 5 different invasion fleets, and you have to attack and destroy each of them at sea. And it combines some air and some sea. The Royal Navy sallies forth from up in Scotland. And it's not a pretty picture, because you don't want to run the Navy through the English Channel attacking a German invasion fleet under German air cover.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how rough that is. And so the game reflects all of that. So that's what I'm playing right now. Also, I'm starting Zeppelin, and I've been doing Target for Tonight with Steve Dixon's campaign. Although after I lost 4 pilots in a row and 4 consecutive missions, I set it aside. It's just a heartbreaking mission, story of a game. So anyway, that's where we are. We shall fight them on the beaches. Well, not really. That was hyperbole on the part of Churchill. I mean, there's no way that would have happened. So Germany had landed. It was over for England.
Glad they didn't. With the introduction of AI, how do you see this affecting game design?
This is really an interesting question. I noticed you didn't ask that to your previous guest.
No,
did you?
ask different questions, so it's not stale.
Okay, so AI is one of the most interesting changes that we're currently going through in culture. The first thing that you have to understand, though, is that AI is naturally inaccurate. It crowdsources information. It crowdsources history. So you're more likely to find that the Civil War was fought to free the slaves than that it was fought for states' rights. The South trying to preserve states' rights was the real goal. And of course, Lincoln being a Republican, the Republican Party was one of the parties, it was founded primarily to preserve individual liberty and to free slaves. And Lincoln did that as a Republican president. He freed the slaves. And that happened during the Civil War, and it was a good opportunity to do that. But the Civil War was not about freeing the slaves. It was about states' rights. But AI will probably tell you that it's about freeing the slaves, because commonly on the street, that's what people are talking. So common misconceptions are reflected in AI as fact, as truth. And the other thing is that AI connects different bits of data in weird ways that they don't connect. Shared words and language cause, like the town of Reading, it's spelled like reading. So AI connects that with books. So there must be libraries in Reading, and it does weird things like that are language based. And it's unfixable. Actually, it's unfixable. It's the equivalent of historical economics. If you know economics history, You can't track every trade, every transaction, and predict the future. And AI can't even predict the past. Most people don't know history. So AI is based on the misconceptions of history as opposed to actual history. So as a historian, you really have a serious challenge using AI. But it is useful in its own way, but not how you'd expect. I think you could do it as an assistant. You could, for instance, and I haven't tried this, and I think I probably will, you could say, here's my rules for this type of thing. What do you recommend I add to this? And it will throw out 15 things, 14 of which you'll discard as absolute garbage. And the 15th will be a good idea. And then you write it in your own words. Another thing is that you could use AI to rewrite what you wrote in somebody else's style. You know, write my fantasy rule set in the style of J.R.R. Tolkien, and you upload it, and it gives you back the Tolkien version of your rules. This actually is quite possible. AI can be very helpful in smaller things like grammar checks and typos, spelling, and so forth. But I think beyond that, there's no way you're ever going to use AI to replace the human creativity. That's something that we have. We're quite unique. It can give us an inspiration, but it really comes down to us to do the writing and to do the work.
Got a little over 6 minutes left.
Okay.
So let me try to get through. I have 3 more questions. How has your experience in military operations played a role in your game designs?
Well, the good news, I can answer this one very quickly because mostly I can't tell you about my military operations experience.
That's fine.
So, you know, I've been at risk a lot of times in international operations. I've done a lot of operations globally in the past. I think I've been involved in one way or another in 7 different wars in my life. It's not a very good thing. Those experiences are not, you know, pleasant, wonderful, lovely experiences. You get to see very dark aspects of human life. But those experiences also drive the design because all of the games, I'm trying to focus on the human touch and what does it mean to do this. And so for me, that's what it does. Is it brings the human touch, brings what really matters, which is people, into the game.
Question 9. What is something most people don't know about you?
Okay, 2 quick things. First, a lot of people don't know very much about me and certainly my military experiences. And that's my kids would say, I do research. That's what I always tell them when they ask what I do. I do research. The other thing is that the best game I've ever designed is called Berserk, and I've never published it.
Oh, wow.
And one day I will. But it's totally a different game mechanic, and it's something that I think I need to get out there.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see. All right. Question 10. Last question. What advice do you have for people that want to start designing game books?
Just get started. Just do it. You only learn it by doing it.
And I think, like you said, you know, if you write a little bit each day, you're heading towards that goal of finishing. So
yeah,
kind of like novel writing, you know, if you, you know, you write a little bit each day, you know, 365 days, you could have a novel, you know.
The other thing is ask for advice. Ask those of us that design war games what our experience is. Ask us to help you. We're always here. We always like to help others. We want this field to grow. We want it to expand. So ask for advice and just get started. If you've got an idea, start writing. That's all there is to it.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas. I'm so glad that we got to talk. And normally we message, but I'm glad that we actually got to talk semi face to face.
Yeah, no, it's a great honor. Thank you. It's
Thank
great
you
to
so
meet
much
you.
for coming on my channel.
I see you got a Pittsburgh shirt on. Does that mean that that's where you're from?
No, this is just my favorite hockey team. So the Penguins.
Okay, just checking.
I was born in Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh,
And
wow.
because my dad, he served under Patton, and we talked about how he knows Helen's
Yeah.
mom and dad, but yeah, so I've been around the country.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me on. And I know we're running short on time, so let me just say here's to you. I didn't get to drink any of my coffee. You kept us going pretty quick.
All right, take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Yep, we'll see you later. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.